As much as I normally endeavor to eschew obfuscation, I know that there are some of you who might believe that you understand what you think that I say most of the time. But I strongly suspect that there are those of you who do not realize that sometimes what you hear is not always what I mean. In fact, if you truly understand what I talk about most of the time in these lessons, then it is quite possible that you are not really listening. But I will argue that if you follow along with these lessons and apply yourself, then you will come to a new and deeper understanding. Whether it is the same understanding that I am trying to impart or not, well, that's another thing altogether. But don't worry about that. You should not place too much importance on the teacher anyway, especially a teacher like me. And especially not in this format. I am teaching from where I am at. In private lessons, I try to guide the student from where they are at. With a video like this, you will each see it from your own unique perspective, whether you are looking up, down, backward, or sideways. And what I teach may be factual, but facts need context. In the words of Joan Didion, the unexamined fact is like a rattlesnake. To stretch that simile, metaphorically speaking, I would point out that to examine a rattlesnake very closely requires a particular set of skills, and that context is also important. And with that, I begin today's lesson. In a recent video, I talked about the way that the legs control the 6 degrees of freedom: heave, surge, sway, pitch, yaw, and roll. The legs are like the engines that move the body and generate power that is directed by the waist and expressed by the arms. It is important to remember that the arms express this power, they do not generate it. In fact, any attempt by the arms to generate power and to generate movement in the 6 degrees of freedom will result in the collapse of the structure and will compromise any of the power and synergy of a properly aligned body. When the arms get involved in generating power, a few things happen. One is that the tiny muscles in the arms interfere with the work of the larger muscle groups. And this makes the technique only as strong as the weakest muscle. The small muscles try to add power, but in the end they end up working like shock absorbers, negating the power of the legs. And they interfere with the efficient transfer of momentum. Another thing that happens is that the work of the class 1 and class 2 levers gets replaced by class 3 levers, which makes everything more difficult and less effective. Another thing that happens is that the singular vector of force and momentum generated by the legs gets divided by the effort of the arms. Power is less focused. Also, the sensing ability of the nervous system and the fascia, the connective tissue, this gets impeded and inhibited by the muscular tension and the poor alignment of the body. And the structure of the body is also weakened. It loses that synergy. It doesn't have the kind of power and adaptability that you get with a relaxed body and a calm mind, and with stabilizing muscles doing their job and allowing those levers and that power generation to work properly. Now, the arms have a very important role. It's just not the macho role that the legs have, and it's not the control that the waist has. The arms are responsible for subtle and profound changes and for determining the shape that the power takes. The arms essentially are responsible for the other dimensions beyond those first 3. They change the shape of the universe, allowing us to navigate it better. It's not as weird as it sounds. Maybe it's weirder. But the arms can affect the way in which the power is expressed. If the legs are like the motor that powers the ship, then the arms are like sails or the rudder or the hull or the keel of the ship. If the legs are like the engine or the jets that power an airplane, then the arms are like the flaps, the ailerons, the fuselage, and the wings of the airplane. The arms are an extension of the body, just as the wings are an extension of the airplane, and the sails are the extension of the ship. Some of the shapes respond automatically to internal and external forces, like the way that the hull, the keel, and the fuselage or the wings do. But other shapes can be consciously manipulated, like the sails and the ailerons and the rudder. And by understanding these shapes and manipulating them, we can do more than simply apply force to a target. We can change the way that our body and mind respond, both consciously and automatically, to external and internal forces. We can transform the effect of the opponent's offensive and defensive tactics. We can change, in a way, the shape of the universe, allowing us to move through it or it to move relative to us. We choose our future. When the opponent throws a punch or tries to push or pull or throw us or lock us up, we don't just have the 6 degrees of freedom to work with, determining how we move ourselves. We can change the effect that the opponent's moves have on us. Further than that, we can change the way that our own movements affect them. And this is where the 8 trigrams come in. What are the 8 trigrams? Well, the 8 trigrams, trigram meaning 3 lines, basically. The 8 trigrams are an extrapolation on the theory of yin and yang. Yin and yang express the dualistic nature of the universe. For something to exist, there must be something to compare it to. It means that everything that is observed is relatively either one thing or not that thing. Either me or not me, up or down, hot or cold, tall or short, masculine, feminine, heavy or light. But these things are relative and depend on the position of the observer. I talked about this in a previous episode. Now, yin and yang could be represented by zeros and ones, but one of the ancient methods is to use solid lines and broken lines. A solid line represents yang and a broken line represents yin. To make sense of natural phenomenon in basic terms, the ancients grouped these lines in sets of 2 and 3. So 2 solid lines represents very yang. A solid line with a broken line underneath it represents less yang. 2 broken lines represents very yin, and a broken line with a yang line under it represents lesser yin. But since a thing can have more than one characteristic, each of which can be seen as either yin or yang, for instance, weather could be cold and dry and sunny, or the weather could be hot, wet, and windy. Now, a person could be tall or short, or strong or weak, or feminine or masculine. I suppose a person could be hot, wet, and windy also. The human mind has trouble grasping anything with more than 2 or 3 characteristics. So 3 was pretty much the limit of what is relatable for most people. It is sort of like the way that we describe a car's engine as having intake, combustion, and exhaust. Those are the 3 parts of an internal combustion engine. Now, if you're a mechanic or an engineer, you have a more detailed understanding of how an internal combustion engine works. But for most of us, that's all the sense we need to make of it. It might also be the starting point for a mechanic diagnosing the car. They'll say, is the problem with the car an intake problem? Is it a combustion problem? Is it an exhaust problem? And then when they figure that out, then they break whatever that is down into its basic elements, and until essentially it comes down to one thing being either yin or yang. So the 8 trigrams, and extrapolation the 64 hexagrams, these are a way of making everything fundamentally reducible to yin and yang. 2 lines represents 4 different possible combinations. 3 lines represents 8 combinations. And 4 lines is too much for the human mind to grasp a lot of the time. Our minds are really only good at grasping 3 dimensions. We can sort of see the 4th one, but if we could see more than that, if we could see 5, 6, or 7 dimensions, then we would all be born able to do string theory mathematics, or we'd be able to remember the future or multiple timelines. The 8 trigrams is a concept that attempts to define fundamental agents of change in the universe. These are represented by iconic natural phenomenon. So you have heaven and earth, fire and water, thunder and mountain, lake and wind. In a more human context, they are described as the creative, the receptive, the clinging, the empty, the arousing, the gentle, the joyous, and the still. And all of these are also human qualities that manifest in martial arts and in our daily life. They have correlations in anatomy and physiology, in geography and geology, in cosmology and astronomy, in chronology and psychology and spirituality. To talk about them in terms of martial arts is to see 8 shapes added on top of the 6 degrees of freedom. It's like changing the shape or adding dimensions in order to interact with more of reality, trying to interact with more dimensions than just the first 3. We can't usually understand moving in 5 or 6 or 8 or 10 dimensions, but we can change the shape of the body and the mind to act like a sail or a rudder in order to steer through them. What this means is that in addition to the power of our legs, we can use these various shapes to change the way that the attacker affects us. We can manipulate our own course through the forces that we cannot actually control directly. So to recap, the legs control the movement of the body through 3-dimensional space. So the legs control the movements that we call heave, up and down, and surge, forward and back, sway, side to side, pitch, tilting forward and back, yaw, rotating, and roll, which is tilting side to side. The rest of the body is just along for the ride. And the limbs cannot contribute much of anything to these types of movement without compromising the structure and power of the body as a whole. Now, that is fine for navigating the 3 dimensions, but what about the rest of them? 10 dimensions if you're into string theory, or 11 dimensions if you're into M theory, or 13 dimensions if you're a hippie. A martial art is, in a way, about navigating the seen and unseen dimensions of our lives. We try to have some sort of self-determination as to what sort of reality we experience. We want to be able to choose between a reality where we are getting beaten up, or where we are winning the fight, or where there is no conflict. In some ways, we can control that with our legs, moving our body to a physical place where a positive outcome is more likely, throwing momentum at a problem in order to affect it. But there are some changes that require us to manipulate forces that are beyond our normal 4-dimensional space-time. This requires us to change the shape of our body, the shape of our emotions, our personality, our relationships with the world and with other people. In a way, I am demonstrating how that works by using first-person plural in the previous sentence. Some of you may find that annoying, but if you can modify your attitude to be more accepting of my idiosyncrasies, then you might be able to navigate this lesson. Some of you find that sentence even more annoying than the previous one. Having 6 degrees of freedom in the legs is a very active kind of control. You choose to move in a particular way, and barring any kind of outside interference, like a force working against you, or somebody punching you or pushing you, or upsetting your balance, the power to move, that's yours. It's like the way that a Harrier jump jet uses its jets and nozzles and, puffer jets to move in all directions. But there are other processes by which we navigate our lives. We change the shape of a body, we change the shape of our minds, our point of view, our knowledge and wisdom. we use creativity, joy, attachment, passion, gentleness, emptiness, stillness, and receptiveness. These will affect the shape of our emotions, our intention, our compassion, our willpower, our physical and spiritual well-being. We can also apply this to the structural dynamics of the body and mind. Some of these shapes, these changes, are like the ailerons and flaps on a regular plane. Perhaps it's better to think of them as like the sails or the rudder or the keel of a ship. You can use them to navigate the world on a daily basis. You can also use them to change the outcome of a fight. But their effect is dependent on the changing state of the world and on the external forces that you are dealing with. So you can move the boom on a sailing ship. You can move the sails. You can change the rigging. But the sails are affected by the wind. So you can control some things, but other things, the sail will respond naturally to natural forces. When we try to use our arms to have direct and active control over a situation, the situation changes. The opponent will adapt, often without even thinking about it. That is why techniques that are taught in a martial arts class sometimes don't work in a real fight. It is like learning how to operate the controls of a boat in a swimming pool. It does not prepare you for the wind and the waves and the changing currents and the chaotic weather. And that is not even taking into account the fact that the weather isn't even trying to mess with you. It doesn't have anything personal against you. It's not like the way an opponent acts in a real fight. In Tai Chi, the 8 trigrams usually relate to 8 concepts or 8 shapes of the body. In some styles, they are represented by 8 archetypal techniques. These are called Pang, Lu, Ji, An, and Zai, and Lie, and Zhou, and Kao. These techniques are not actually the 8 shapes, though. They are just expressions of them. It is like saying that a smile is not happiness. It is just one of the things that can happen when a person is happy. In the next few videos, I will discuss each of the 8 shapes in more detail, and then hopefully this video will make a lot more sense.
Congratulations on making it to the end of one of my videos. That is quite an accomplishment. If you would like to see more of these videos, then please visit sinclairinternal.arts.com, where you can make a one-time donation, or subscribe or sign up for a private online lesson. If you would like to see fewer of these videos, that is going to cost you.